Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome to the showdown between the Empire led by the Volkswagen and the Dwarves who are going to be led by Belgar Ironhammer. So without further ado, let's jump right into this match and have some fun. So guys, we're going to be trying something that is certainly a little bit risky. We have an entire front line of Greatswords, so we're going with a very heavy infantry build. And of course, as you guys know, the Empire isn't really known for its cost-effective infantry. These Greatswords do have a couple chevrons, but as far as their stats, 32 weapon strength with pretty good AP, 23, and a bonus for its infantry of 9, so they're going to be pretty suited for taking out miners, dwarf warriors. I think they actually beat Longbeards 1-1 to Longbeards with great weapons, but again, it's still pretty close and atrocious, and dwarves do have rune support and other things like that. But as you guys know, relatively recently, the Warrior Priest did get buffed. So if we go and look at the Warrior Priest here, he's actually pretty tanky on this steed here. I think he has like over 100 armor, but yes, there we go. Come on, you can do it. So the Shield of Faith is now an AoE effect. So originally the Warrior Priest abilities were like single target. I think he had like one AoE effect, but you can see this one is going to affect allies in range, as is the Hammer of Sigmar. The Grand Soulfire Bombardment, which comes with both the Warrior Priest and Volkmar, I didn't really feel like you needed magic resist against the dwarves, so we cut that, but we're going to be trying to buff the Greatswords, just using the Warrior Priest and Volkmar to buff up the lines and see if we can actually get through the Dwarven armor. This is something I've never really tried before, and I think kind of the way to beat dwarves is probably to go a little bit wider, use some cav and some other handgunners and tools like that, but I think this might actually work, so we're going to give it a try here. We do have the Warrior Priest and Volkmar on his Pimp Chariot with Banishment. We have a healer, Jade Wizard with Lore of Life, so he does have the Earth Blood as well as Regrowth, so obviously if you're going to be going for a sustained, grindy infantry style of play, especially with very expensive units, because Greatswords are pretty costly, I think that the Earth Blood and Regrowth is very important. Up on the high ground here in the forest, we do have the Sterling's Revenge, who do have stock, so they can avoid the artillery fire, good armor piercing against the gyrocopters and other things like that. So he's going to be getting in there and having some fun. And we have two Reichsguard in the forest. So two regular groups. We didn't have enough money for the Zintlers, unfortunately, so we're going to Walmart and getting some of these guys, although they're much better than Walmart quality. Reichsguard are a very solid cav. So that's it for my whole army. For my opponent, he did deploy on the far side, so I was a little bit bummed. I was hoping he would deploy here so I wouldn't have to march so far, but he did deploy over here. He does have the miners with blasting charges? No, just regular miners. So it looks like they're just a distraction there. Miners with blasting charges here, a secondary line of Longbeards, Norgrimling's Ironbreakers, more Longbeards, two Quarrelers in the back, Runesmith. It looks like he does have all of the runes and the hammer. And then he also has Belgar Ironhammer, who's not bad in this matchup. He's very tanky, and you don't need a ton of AP, I suppose, against the Empire, but he's going to be tough to kill for sure. And aside from that, he does have the Goblobber, the Grudge Thrower. He has Giant Slayers here, which are very good against Empire Cav, so I love this pick from my opponent. Anti-large, armor piercing, a bonus for large of 30, so if they get on my Reichsguard, it's going to be absolute destruction. On top of that, he does have Dwarf Warriors with great weapons, two Gyrocopters with Brimstone guns, it looks like, and that is pretty much it. So let's get this party started, guys. So right now my forces are advancing. Unfortunately, the Goblobber is going to be doing a ton of work against my Greatswords. You can see they're getting taken to town pretty hard, as they do have to trudge through the swamp. In the meantime, the flight of the Valkyries does queue, and the Gyrocopters with the Brimstone guns are going to be flying over the little pit here. And you can see I am rushing over my Sterling's Revenge to try and fend those guys off, because they do a pretty good AP, and I don't want them to sit and shoot at my Greatswords or even try and snipe my Warrior Priest or my Caster, which they're not the best at, but still it's free damage for my opponent, so I want to make sure I have something. And that's also why I brought the Sterling's Revenge, because I wanted to have some answer to Gyrocopters in case he tried to meme me in that way. So just advancing still, the miners here, it looks like they're going to be falling back as the Reichsguard do advance out, because I figured, hey, maybe I could get a free pick if he stayed, but he probably wanted to use these guys just to kind of muck up my army, force me to blob on them, where he could shoot me with his artillery and his bows, but I think with the Reichsguard, he's going to be falling back here. The Goblobber is going to be switching targets. It's now going to be shooting this group here, which I like, because this group is a little bit obstructed. You can see a bombing run from the gyros coming in. In the meantime, I do try and dodge, because I saw these guys flying. I thought he was going to bomb, but ultimately it wasn't too big of a deal. Sterling's Revenge doing a really good job. They do have short range, unfortunately. They only have 90 range, but their AP is really solid. So do they take out a Gyrocopter? It doesn't look like it. One of those gyros, I'm sure, is just kind of smoking and melting down here from the firepower. But my opponent using, it's rare you say this, but the DAWI maneuverability here is actually out getting away from my guns. And he's able to get over here and start shooting at my Reichsguard. But I do charge in, and we're going to try and get some free damage on these miners. So you can see they're going to go in and knock some of these dwarves into the swamp, hopefully doing some damage. Probably not worth it, to be honest, because it does pull me in range of the Quarrelers, but, Reichsguard do have shields as well as heavy armor, but it looks like I think the Runesmith is advancing. No, he's not. So I'm just taking a lot of damage from the blasting charges, which I kind of thought the Reichsguard could absorb them a little bit better, but that still did a ton of damage. I was like, damn, these dwarves are getting pretty crunk, but now the inexorable force of the Empire, the Greatswords coming in, I do use a Regrowth to kind of top those guys off, because they still have a lot of models, but man, I took a ton of damage. Over here, I do take a Rune of Wrath and Rune as well, but My infantry quality is a little bit better aside from the Norgamling's Ironbreakers, so if I can weather the storm and get into melee, I think we'll certainly be in pretty good shape here. And you can see I'm just kind of falling back right now, trying to get out of range of the Coilers. And Volkmar is coming in on his wagon. He's going to lead the charge of the Empire. Blasting charges are coming in. They don't do too much damage to armor, but it's still pretty good for the cost. And Volkmar comes in a blaze of fury, running over some of these miners. You can see they're being just dragged into the swamps here, just face down in the mud, which is pretty funny. And he actually takes out 2 models there, which isn't bad. He'll be swooping in, but we get a really, really good banishment because the archer's bunched up. Here comes the banishment from Volkmar the Grim, and man, that just wrecked those Dwarven Quarrelers. Pretty much, you know, half their health gone. My opponent is able to dodge with one group, but the other one takes pretty much the full brunt of that, so that was pretty good. The Warrior Priest has engaged in the front, kind of leading the Vanguard, and the Greatswords are going to be charging through the swamps. And they should make pretty quick work of these miners, especially with the buffs, the Hammer of Sigmar, as well as the Shield of Faith, kind of mitigating the damage they would be taking. Some Overwatch fire from the Dwarves coming in on my Sterling's Revenge, which is going to be tough, but we do take out our Gyrocopter there, but yeah, he switched his artillery as well as his bows there, so that's going to be tough. But the frontline fight's underway. You can see Volkmar and his boys just ravage those miners in the front line and terror out them, so we are going to be advancing. In the back, I send one group of Reiksguard up and around the top to distract the Slayers, because he's going to have to respect this here, and you can see I am casting a regrowth, but the other group gets in on the Coilers here, and is just going to run them through, which is incredibly good for me. So we're able to get in there, and now hopefully I can sweep through to the front line, get this other group of Coilers, and you know, net some value. So you know, I'm going to keep trying to charge those guys down, do my best not to get pinned, but it's hard because he has so many units. The Gyrocopters, of course, doing good AP damage to my Reiksguard, so I really like that pick for my opponent here. Sterling's Revenge are trying to advance to get up there. This one group of Greatswords, I'm trying to get up and around, but that was a really good pick. Getting the Coilers, we were pushing through, taking a ton of damage, and my opponent also using the Hammer of Carrick Draz, I think is what it's called. Yeah, so that lowers melee attack and weapon damage. But we are getting into these long grids, not doing a ton of damage, but the Greatswords just getting blasted by those charges, which is tough. And yeah, that's kind of what's nice about using like cheaper infantry, is that they just take those and it's not like as impactful, but the Greatswords are expensive, like I said. Volkmar rolling into the main blob, and we have a fight on our hands. The Warrior Priest is in here, the Greatswords are fighting, and you can hear for the Emperor from Volkmar there. But we got a lot of buffs going off. So we got the Grand Shield of Faith, which is giving us some ward save, making our relatively squishy Greatswords a little bit tankier. And of course the Hammer is being popped every chance I get. But the Cav in the back, the Reiksguard, doing a great job just running through these Quarrelers, doing a ton of damage. And I'm doing my best to outmaneuver these Slayers, but I'm playing a little bit of a dangerous game. So at this point, I had a decision to make. Do I let this Godblobber keep shooting, or do I try and Alpha Strike it? But if I Alpha Strike it, I'm going to get pinned by these Giant Slayers. So it's a bit of a tough engagement here. So I think I end up going for the Godblobber, because it's just raining hell on my Sterling's Revenge. And if I know if I lose these guys, I'm not really going to have any great answers to his flying units here. But here's the blob, my Jade Wizard. I got a little bit sloppy and sent him in, and you can see Belegar was doing his Dwarven Karate here. But the Greatswords are still chopping through a lot of these guys, so I was happy. The bonus versus infantry and the AP, and of course the Warrior Priest giving really good buffs. And the Volkswagen is just kind of riding around. So I think in the back, I saw my Knights were going to get compromised here, so I decided to go back with the Volkswagen and try and provide some support. And you can see I'm force pathing the Reiksguard through up to the front, trying to collapse this DAWI formation. And you can see the Greatswords actually chopping through the very tanky long grids here. And another banishment from Volkmar the Grim right on top of those Norgamling's Ironbreakers. The first time they've really taken any substantial damages from that banishment there. Puts them down to about half health, maybe from about 70%, so definitely not bad. Dwarf Warriors are crumbling, the Warrior Priest giving them the Hammer of Sigmar, putting their melee attack up to 59. So far so good. Bounce fire is pretty even, a little bit in my opponent's favor, but we are collapsing a lot of his formations. You can see his missiles are very tattered in the back. I have a healthy group of Greatswords trying to get on these Giant Slayers, but the problem with Giant Slayers is they actually have really good AP, so it's not like regular Slayers that are just going to bounce off Greatswords. They're actually going to be able to do some damage. So you can see the Giant Slayers, who are almost as big as the Greatswords, which is, look at that, they're like the size of the Greatswords. I feel like they're like, I don't know, maybe they're the more well-fed of the Dwarven Slayers. But regardless, the Gyrocopter is still swooping overhead, relatively low on ammunition, and now we have a fight on our hands. So the Greatsword's getting a nice rear charge on these Dwarves. Hopefully they'll be able to get through some of them, and of course these guys don't have much in the way of defense here, but the Greatsword's still taking a pounding, and the Hammer of Carrick Draz going down yet again, so Volkmar the Grim needs to come in here and kind of help out a little bit. He does pop the Hammer of Sigmar as well, and the Grand Hammer of Sigmar, as well as the Grand Shield of Faith, trying to keep these guys fighting, but it looks good. I think this part of the battlefield is going to go in our favor. The Warrior Priest is going to slip away from this engagement, and he's charging in for Sigmar. He's going to go for that artillery there, so hopefully he'll be able to take it out. And I think the new Warrior Priests are very, very good for sure. So he gets in there, he punts a couple of those dwarves off the artillery pieces, and hopefully he'll be able to kind of clean that up. In the meantime, over here, it's not going as well. My Greatswords, who are somewhat healthy, do get the Grand Hammer and the Rune of Wrath and Ruin from my opponent. So it looks like Belegar and company should be able to clean them up, especially with the Norgamling's Ironbreakers, who are just roided to the teeth. They have 113 melee defense from the mighty Oathstone, so man, they are just a force that does not want to go down. Over here, my forces are kind of routed as well, so those Greatswords are pushed back. Probably a little bit of AP coming in from those Gyrocopters, but they're out of ammunition now. But this one group's healthy. 73 models. Volkmar the Grim is providing his benediction, which gives him leadership, and is also running over some of these lightly armored dwarves. He's up to 131 kills, so man, I'm really liking Volkmar here. And basically just trying to shut down the artillery. You can see they're shaken, so they'll probably get terror routed here in a moment by Volkmar. And let's see, is there anything left in the way of cav? So it looks like my Sterling's Revenge have come back, but they're so beat up. I don't think they're going to contribute much. My 10 Reichsguard, the Heroes of the Empire, it looks like they're rocking 13 leadership. They might be able to get in here and do some damage, but it looks like the Nordgrimling's Ironbreakers do intercept them, and that's 100% going to break them. They're at 3 leadership now, so there's no coming back for them. Over here, we do have 66 Greatswords who are going to be able to clean up these 24 Dwarf Warriors, no problem. Just trying to ride around, and at this point, I'm like, okay, I need to get Volkmar, I need to get the Warrior Priest, I need to chase down Quarrelers, I need to clean up any of the scraps, take advantage of the fact that I'm riding on a Volkswagen, and kind of even out the odds a little bit, because I do have some rallying Greatswords over here who will come back. I have a healthy group, so I figured if I cleaned everything up, my Greatswords plus the buffs of Volkmar and the Warrior Priest would be able to beat, you know, a very healthy Belegar in the end. Because again, Belegar doesn't have heavy AP, so he's going to struggle against pretty much all these targets I have. So we'll do a little bit of fast forwarding. You can see Volkmar just riding through on his pimp cart, and a rune is being popped right there. But as soon as I see the rune, I just kind of run. We're basically both rallying our forces right now. You can see the Greatswords here are gathering, so it's kind of like the final showdown. But Volkmar doing a really good job just riding through these Quarrelers, and he actually shatters one of them. Because if my opponent had his Quarrelers, he would be able to dictate the terms and force me to advance. But my opponent also doing the same thing. A really, really good play here. I love it, using the Gyrocopters to chase down my Greatsword. So, because those Greatswords, there was quite a few, but now they're obviously shattered and taken out. But that would have been very helpful in the final battle here. Balance of power is pretty damn even. A little bit of advantage for my opponent here. But you can see this is going to be it. So the final battle is underway. The Greatswords have come to assist Volkmar. They're going to charge through the swamp, which I believe is a penalty for everything fighting here. So my opponent's troops, Volkmar comes in. The Warrior Priest comes in with the rear charge with the Steel Hammer. And Volkmar the Grim, of course, providing buffs. So we're both just going buff wild. Mighty Oathstone. You can see the Grand Hammer of Sigmar and the Shield of Faith. Just giving a ton of buffs, but the Gyrocopters are coming in, which is going to be really good, because if he rear charges, it's going to break the leadership probably of my Greatswords, who are at 15 leadership right now. This group is still pretty good at 64, but man, just an incredibly even battle right here. The Gyrocopters actually attacking Volkmar the Grim, which is pretty funny, and the Warrior Priest following them in suit, trying to take down these Gyrocopters, potentially going to be able to get some kills here. And you can see these Greatswords have 45 models, but man, they're getting worn down by Belegar and these guys, and this is just a bloody, atrocious fight here in the swamp. But Volkmar coming in with his Volkswagen, going to be running over some of those guys, but man, those guys would just not break. And I knew that if I could break the Nordgrimling's Ironbreakers, it would be a win, because, you know, Belegar would probably just get surrounded and beaten down by the Greatswords. But you could see just a very, very grindy fight here as Volkswagens, or just a Volkswagen, just cycle charging. The Gyrocopters are cycle charging, so just good stuff all around. We take an inventory. It looks like 7 Greatswords here. This group is pretty much offline, but there are 15, so they could come back and help. But their HP pool is so low, down to 520 here. Belegar's not taking much damage, though. The Greatswords have 24 models, the Grand Hammer, but very good Hammer of Carrick Draz. That thing has just been solid all game, putting their melee attack down to 0. So at this point, they're pretty much going to just bounce right off those Nordgrimling's Ironbreakers. Ooh, let's see them. They're at 26. They're actually shaken. So the very elite Ironbreakers are shaken because of Volkmar's cycle charging. He's up to 173 kills. Warrior Priest is getting pretty, beat up here. But at this point, you can see the balance is shifting. I'm starting to lose my forces. The Greatswords are running from the swamps here, and the Gyrocopters are just able to chase me down. So I kind of thought there might be a glimmer of hope if I could cycle charge and break off the Nordgrimlings here. But at this point, there really isn't much I could do. The Greatswords here, it looks like there's 15. There's a couple coming back here, 7. The Warrior Priest is also rallying, but from here on out, I just decided to go in and let the Volkswagen have a final stand. So he's just going to be fighting, shouting the incantations of Sigmar as he is surrounded by his fellow dwarves. So perhaps just a little bit of a rivalry, because they're usually allies, I would assume, in lore. But here there was some grudge to be settled. Volkmar must have slipped some sort of a insult in the past here, but Volkmar is going to be taken out by the dwarves. So Belegar and these Ironbreakers and the Gyrocopters do hold to the bitter end. So very well played to my opponent. That was an incredible game, and it was super fun experimenting with a new tactic, because typically I wouldn't use like Greatswords or heavy infantry against the dwarves. I might bring like 1 or 2 and just go super wide, surround them, compromise their back line with like swordsmen and just like low tier stuff. And I think that's typically how you beat the dwarves. But a couple months ago, before the buffs to the Warrior Priest, this wouldn't have even really been an option. You really need those kind of dual buffs from the Warrior Priest, which makes the Greatswords a more competent frontline troop, because typically they're just not going to be able to trade effectively. But they did well this time. 72, 34, 93, 106, 119. I was very happy with those guys. I think if I had maybe been a little bit more careful with the Sterling's Revenge, or maybe even just cut them, but I needed something to keep the gyrocopters honest. So yeah, I don't know, maybe just cut one greatsword. And if I want to go with this style of a build and bring a little bit more kind of width, just go with like a couple swordsmen and just so I can wrap around. Also, I was a little bit sloppy with the Reiksguard, but my opponent had good answers. The runes were really good, the Giant Slayers were solid, so maybe just going, being a little bit more conservative with the greatswords and bringing them in later in the battle, because it was very good until I committed to attacking that artillery piece, which was pretty catastrophic, because at that point I got surrounded. But yeah, I really liked my opponent's army. It was incredibly cool. You had AP, you had Longbeards, just in case I went with like lower tier infantry who would trade better with like swordsmen and flagellants and stuff. It was a super cool build. So very well played to my opponent, Lau6978. Look forward to running into you again on ladder, and hopefully you guys enjoyed this Greatsword Empire build. Take care, guys.